This is definitely a message of hope. And I've said that to you, and I really want to make sure that I push that out because, there is a lot of darkness on this. This realm is one that was established in the fungus type of, by fungus beings. I mean, it's just that simple, which is why there's just always been this high level of confusion, even when you try to just be super positive and super all of that, like something seems to kind of always come through. You have people, the light workers have talked about this, for decades, right? So we know that there's something else at work. And so I'm a big believer, and I'd rather look at the darkness and look and figure out what it is, knowing that my light is strong enough to shine into it. And if we even just think of it scripturally, if you look at the amount of scriptures and from Christianity, Islam, Judaism, that talk about shining light on the darkness, there's just no coincidence that that's always being instructed. And we are light.
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Higher Journeys. I am your host, Alexis Brooks, and I am so delighted to share with you one of my dearest friends and I would say sisters on this planet. Her name is Robyn McClendon, and she's got a boatload, y'all, to share with us today. I have to tell you, as well planned as I like to be, there's certain interviews that I do that I feel instinctively just have to flow and go where they go, as I always say, for the highest good of all involved. And Robyn is going to bring it today. And I'm going to tell you right up front, Robyn is our special guest instructor coming up for the third in our series of 3, Cracking the Ascension Code. And this is what we're going to be centering the conversation around today. But I want to just throw out a few terms to you immediately. One is urgency. Another is hope, stronger than hope, trust. And a third is expansion, evolution, ascension. There's so many words we can use, Robyn, to just describe what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you a little disclaimer, y'all. We're going to get a little deep because we're going to talk about not just the light, but the darkness that has been trying to usurp the light, but ultimately how the light will prevail. And so with that, let's get started. Robyn, welcome to the show. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always good to be here with you, Alexis.
Well, it's good for you to be in our presence on this very important day. And, what's to be said about the times that we're living in other than exciting, a little scary because it's unfamiliar territory. And you're going to take us down the rabbit hole into some of that territory. But I want to begin at the beginning because you have a big story. This is not just about your personal story, but what you have been able to glean based on your own experience about what's happening now. And frankly, what sort of non-human, we'll call it extraterrestrial influence on current affairs may be going on as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start with a question about what you believe this reality to be. Just a little question. We've talked about this matrix-like existence that many feel that we are in. And yet, as I contemplate the idea of perhaps living, when we talk about a matrix, we're talking about something we assume to be constructed, not organic. And yet there's this paradox that says, but there's an organic aspect to this planet, to us, to the universe. So where does the matrix come in? Would this be considered a sort of overlay from your perspective? What is the matrix to you? Let's start with that.
That's a great question. And so, yes, just very simply, it really is an overlay, or, you and I've talked, we talk frequently, of course, and, you've used the word hijacked as well. And it is a hijacked part of, I'll explain the way, a visual of how it's been shown to me. Gaia is basically an exoskeleton. So everything that we're feeling on the whole top of this planetary or realm, however we see it, is more of an exoskeleton type of structure, with lots of resonance and frequencies and all kinds of plasmic, etheric, fields that go from solid to gas to liquid. So, we have the idea of matter being very transient within the structure. And there's lots of portals and spaces and places in and out of this realm. It's just a really beautiful realm as I've seen it. But a part of the resonant frequencies at one point got basically usurped and hijacked, and that part had to be blocked off and sort of quarantined, as we could say. And I've asked repeatedly exactly how did what I've been shown to be a sort of a fungus, a hive-like viral fungoid type of entity, how did it even come to be? And to be very honest, Gaia, or the planetary logos I call Gaia, just hasn't answered that yet. And every time I get this sense that it's just not the time to understand exactly how that happened. That will be revealed in time, but it did in fact happen. And so it was closed off. And so the idea of the firmament, the dome, etc., I've been shown that it is over a portion of her exoskeleton, and the fungus basically was trapped under it. And in order for it to survive, it basically attracted life form to it. So you have life form that is actually just germane to this firmament area, that does do the reincarnation process and does do the soul loop. But there are many of us who during these times have come back into this through a process that's similar to the birth process, she said. Even when I've asked that, it's like we are coming through the birth process, but ours is a little different. And we're actually able to still stream the frequency and the resonant frequency of the earth, of Gaia, back up into this realm to do the work that we're doing. Mm-hmm. So to your point, everything that touches the exoskeleton under this firmament, so all the ground, the trees, everything that's coming up actually does have the frequency of what we would think of as the earth or the real or the natural realm. And then everything else inside of it is more part of the fungus.
Do y'all understand what she's saying? It can be a little bit complex, I suppose. But you did answer the question. I thank you for that. I'm notorious, Robyn, for taking things out of order. I'm not great at chronology because I don't think linearly, right? There's no such thing. So I think it's time that we go out of order and maybe go back a little bit, because you have had, people may be saying, how does she know this? Well, you have had, like so many other experiencers, a wealth of downloads vis-a-vis your own childhood encounters. Let's take a few minutes to talk about that and how you came into having this sort of purview about what's going on. What happened in your childhood?
So some of my earliest memories around the time of about 4 years old or so, I found that I was having a very difficult time just integrating just small things. The foods, eating foods, just the functions of my body. It was a number of things like that just as a kid, I can remember having a kind of hard time with. And there's a number of reasons for that that are more of this realm. I grew up as a little girl in a house that there was, alcohol abuse, and, we know the kind of trauma that can go with that. So there was a lot of things that I experienced that I felt were a little polarizing. But the one thing that was always comforting for me is that I was visited by it was frequency. I don't even really want to say beings, because when you see beings, immediately a person thinks of a solid form. But they were more in the field of consciousness, that were always helping me integrate. They were helping me with my dietary issues. They were helping with body functioning. And they also were doing a lot of kind of, I felt like the earliest memories they were helping to integrate a lot of what was going on with my mental frequencies and the bodily frequencies. So during this time period, I would have lots and lots of nosebleeds, and a lot of it had to do with electrical, magnetic frequency stuff that they would sort of kind of help me to understand what was going on. And these beings were definitely like what I would always remember at the end of sessions. I could see them because it was sort of like they were beings, but frequency, energetic, more so. And I would see them when they would leave my room. They would leave and actually go back into the lamppost. So outside of my window, I could see them going back into the lampposts and disappearing. They would almost morph, and they were tall black, just like those tall lampposts, you know, and they would disappear. And there was a certain sort of sadness when they left because I felt they were always sort of helping me. And then, so this went on for a number, for several years before I remember not needing them any longer. And then over the course of the years, they would sort of reappear. And I didn't really even understand why they were reappearing because I never even saw them as sort of like extraterrestrials or things like that. And it wasn't until I had a number of talks with our mutual friend, Barry Littleton, who just one day just said, Robyn, like you're an experiencer. And I'm like, no, it's just this, you know, and he's like, no. And he would start breaking a lot of this down. I'm thinking, and then it started making sense. It started popping in. And then I could understand exactly more what those experiences were. And being in my background as an artist and an anthropologist, there were a couple of things in two cultures. One of them was in the Australian Aborigine culture, and they called him Electric Man. And you see this same type of symbolism in the Mayan culture. And they have a similar name for them. I can't remember the name of it because it's in their language, but it's similar. And when I saw that, I'm like, that's exactly what was visiting me, this idea of this Electric Man sort of being. And so moving fast forward, what I really began to understand is that these were the Black Mantis that are basically electromagnetic beings that hold a neutral frequency around within this realm. And I can get more into detail about that, but that's basically were the beings that are part of helping me hold resonance here in this realm.
It's fascinating how so many experiencers and others who experiencers broadly, experience phenomena, speak of this electromagnetic aspect being integral to the experience, whether they're feeling a surge of electricity, seeing it in the form of light, and in your case, the beings literally morphing into the lamppost, the light.
Yeah.
I've always found that fascinating. We know we're electrical beings and that this universe is teeming with electricity to varying degrees and thus frequency. We're going to talk about the frequency and how it is shifting right now. But I want to ask you a question, Robyn, about these childhood visits. Do you believe so many years later that those visits were somehow preparing you for this moment in our human history?
Yeah, I do. And one of the things that I've asked Gaia, the logos of the planet, and the Mantis, is what was up with what was going on when I was younger, like, especially the nosebleeds. I really remember those. And a part of it, what they explained to me is that in order to have sort of direct communication, so it's not my form of communication is not, I'm not downloading, I'm not, I'm not channeling, or sort of like, the writing, the automatic writing. It's not that. It's a little bit like a remote viewing type of thing, but it's not exactly that. The way my frequency is wired, it's just like a direct line of communication. So just like I'm talking to you right now, I can just speak to the various resonant frequencies that are working with me, or allowing me to work with them, or allowing me to be able to put into words within this human experience. what it is that they're doing or what's happening, that type of thing. So it's like I'm almost hardwired to just have this direct communication. And so that's what a lot was happening with the nosebleeds. And also because it's electromagnetic frequency, a part of it was trying to help me integrate this particular avatar so that that frequency just wouldn't sort of blow me out. And so they needed to start when I was younger so that I kind of grew and developed with the frequency versus just all at one point. At whatever point you're ready to sort of step into that space, it's sometimes it's a little bit too much. It kind of can blow people out.
We hear that a lot. And speaking of our mutual friend, Barry Littleton,
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
getting that echo. Forgive me, guys. We're going to just try to stay with this. He speaks about, Robyn, what he calls temporal aphasia, which is a form of sort of, well, I've asked him to describe what that is. It's a discomfort because of the beings that he's around, and he says that his are physical contact encounters versus in the non-physical state, of which some feel many have. But in a physical environment, for instance, being on the craft and being in their presence, because of that uh, uh, EMF, I guess you could call it, abbreviating the buoyancy, not buoyancy, that's not the word I'm looking for, but the power of the electromagnetic field that surrounds them and how they operate can
Yeah.
be overwhelming to the physical system. And so that temporal aphasia will kick in, where there'll be sort of, I would imagine, extreme vertigo and other physical symptoms that many human systems, avatars, can't take.
Right. Yeah, they do. I know that there's numbers. So the mantis, the ones that I've been in contact with or have been in contact with me, let's put it like that, and that I've grown up with, the black mantis, like I said, they're electromagnetic beings and they use the Earth's grid system to move around. So they're not necessarily using craft. They're using just the electromagnetic field. Let's say similar to what Tesla talked about, we can pull free energy out of. It's just a grid system. You do have, I have been with some of the, on some of the crafts, but like my crafts experiences have been organic. So they're like almost forms that are grown like pods. They're normally seen as orbs of light when you see them in the sky. A lot of times they're referred to as these sort of orange big balls of light you can see moving in the sky, that type of thing. And those have mostly been schools. So for instance, the mantis are more scientists. They deal with more of the science, what we would call science or what we would call medicine. They don't call it medicine or science because there's not a sense of disease in that realm. And, like in the larger realm or resonance, they're not the sense of disease. So you don't need doctors, you know what I mean? But the idea of what happens to keep the electromagnetic grid at a neutral place. So at harmony and balance. That's what they basically do. And so if we see ourselves as electromagnetic beings, sometimes we're a little bit more electric, sometimes we're a little bit more magnetic, like we're more negative or more positive. And what we normally talk about in our terms are more aesthetic, more acidic or more alkaline. So this same type of thing. So we're normally trying to keep our body, as we've been told in modern medicine, more, in a neutral between alkaline and acidic, right? So this is still electromagnetic. We're still dealing with electricity and magnetism. So the mantis the black mantis, I like to make sure I continue to say that because there are a number of different of these sort of, when you say mantis, people immediately think of more like praying mantises, and where there is a part of a species, the black mantises are a bit different than that. They're more like the octopi, which the octopi handle the region of the portals in the water. And they're sort of like the mantises are the waters above and the octopi are the waters below, if you want to think of it like that. And they're all kind of portals and in grids, because remember, we're talking about the fact that I've seen the earth and it's been shown to me as an exoskeleton. So then everything is.
Yeah. Let me stop you there. When you say exoskeleton, for those that I can't say that I completely understand what you mean when you say that, what do you mean exoskeleton?
So if we think about the difference of a bug with a shell, so the shell is there and then everything inside is squishy. So their skeleton is on the outside, where we and beings like mammals and what have you, our skeleton is in the inside, right? So we have the skeleton, our physical skeleton, and then all of our flesh and our, you know, our makeup of our avatar is on the outside. Mm-hmm. So the exoskeleton is a much more flexible body form to take. It expands very easily, which is why we're in expansion, what you and I like to refer to as expansion. Same thing, ascension, however you want to, you know, it's been commonly called that. But I've always seen it as expansion because Gaia has shown me it as expansion, and she shows me how her her exoskeleton grows and how it continues to expand, which is why so many of our extraterrestrial life form brothers and sisters take on this exoskeleton type of body, because it's so much more easy to put. You can put your electromagnetic field, your plasma field, your etheric field, because, you know, there are different fields that these beings pull from, are more comfortable with. It's easier to put it into a body that has an exoskeleton than it is to grow a whole skeleton and then try to piece it on the outside. You know what I mean? If you really kind of think about it,
right?
It's
that makes perfect sense.
It's a more it's an easier form to adopt. Mm-hmm. The energy fields too.
I imagine movement, ebbing and flowing, warping and wefting, moving in and out, depending on the environment they're traversing.
Precisely. Exactly.
And, yeah. Exactly. And I think of, again, Barry, your ears must be ringing, dude. I'm going to have to give you a call later. We spoke about this idea of craft being, some of them, a sort of mitosis, morphomitosis, that being a cellular form that's able to split off and create more forms that are sentient. We also talked about this idea of fungus like mushrooms. So if you look at a mushroom, this to me is fascinating. When you look at a mushroom growing in the ground or above the ground, what does the very structure of a mushroom look like?
Spacecrafts that just take off from their pod.
What are your thoughts about that? What's the relationship, you think? Are those mushrooms more than we think they are?
Well, you know, definitely, I think they're definitely a part of the mycelial network, right? They're normally right by trees, and we know trees are very dominant in their ability to transfer and communicate all the way around the other side of the planet. And this has been a part of our cultural mythology, you know, going back tens of thousands of years, that trees have this ability to talk to one another. They're, you know, and most funguses, most of these mushroom type fungi grow near trees. So I do believe that there's this huge connection to it. I know that my experiences is on those sort of, you know, homegrown ships, you know, or the ones that are definitely organic. Those are learning. So I've always found those to be like learning environments. So the beings that are on those ships have shown me themselves as being, it's the idea of consciousness. So it's like the idea of cosmic or super consciousness meeting the consciousness that's held within the body. So, you know, we have all these levels of consciousness, right? So either we're always ascending. So our whole point of ascension is we're ascending our consciousness up to a level that we're able to communicate telepathically. And, you know, we can use all of the clairs. And, you know, it's this idea of us upgrading this being, this body, this avatar. Well, you have beings that exist in the field of cosmic consciousness and higher consciousness that choose to take on some sort of body in order to communicate with us. So they're kind of like moving into a chosen descension to be able to communicate with us and teach us and help up level us. And so a lot of times the orb ships are like light ships. And so these beings are moving from a pure light, the essence, into a body that looks more like a light orb. And then they inhabit these crafts that are organic, like orbs. And that's been my experience of them. And every time I've been on them, it's definitely been, they've been teaching me something, showing me something. and a lot of it's just been being downloaded into my avatar. Like I'm seeing it and I'm asking, okay, I'm not going to remember this. And they're like, don't worry about it. It's integrating and etc. So yes, and I've seen many of these in physical nature. When I see them, I know that generally that evening they're letting me know that that I'll be coming onto the ship and they're going to be downloading more information. So yeah, I agree. And Barry and I have talked about those type of experiences as well.
Yeah.
There's only a couple of times I've actually been on what I feel are physical ships, like that you feel are made from some type of metallic that's not of this, it's of Earth, but it's not in this realm. It's more in another aspect, another part of the planet. I would say twice. And in both of those times, they felt like more like they were definitely military operations. I felt like that was where defense was happening. These kind of ships have a certain type of defense. And the defense that was going on was there were like Earth beings on there, like physical, the idea of the super soldier kind of concept, integrating also with terrestrial beings that were on the ship. And that's been twice.
So you've experienced that yourself. I'm nodding because this is such a common story.
Yeah.
There's an inextricable link that we cannot ignore between the human and non-human influence. I'm just going to keep it very vanilla, very homogenized. We won't have to get
Right.
into detail. I want to fast forward now because you're the mantis. Mantis. Do you call them mantis or mantids? Because I know they're used both ways. Mantis.
Either way, I mean,
Okay.
sometimes it's funny. Sometimes they'll refer themselves as the mantids, and it seems like it's a plural form, and then the mantis is a singular form. That's the only way I can sort of say when they actually refer to themselves is how it is.
Interesting.
So
these beings have been talking a lot lately, Robyn. I want to fast forward to now because this is the crux of our conversation and frankly why Robyn will be doing this incredibly powerful workshop coming up. Urgent. Remember, we started out the conversation this way.
Yeah.
You not recently, as recent as this morning, got a download about what's going on now. Now we got to keep this relatively G-rated. You know what I mean? So let's go for it. Tell us.
We've been around the block a couple of times, you and I. We understand that.
Yeah.
But so this is definitely a message of hope. And I've said that to you, and I really want to make sure that I push that out because there is a lot of darkness on this. This realm is one that was established in the fungus type of by fungus beings. I mean, it's just that simple, which is why there's just always been this high level of confusion, even when you try to just be super positive and super all of that, like something seems to kind of always come through. You have people, the light workers have talked about this, for decades, right? So we know that there's something else at work. And so I'm a big believer, and I'd rather look at the darkness and look and figure out what it is, knowing that my light is strong enough to shine into it. And if we even just think of it scripturally, if you look at the amount of scriptures and from Christianity, Islam, Judaism, that talk about shining light on the darkness, there's just no coincidence that that's always being instructed. And we are light. And it's very easy for us to keep our frequencies at a high place. So once you settle that you're light and you do have the ability, you don't have to be brought down, although the fungus is constantly sending out sort of signals and images and things that kind of keep on lowering your energy. But once you settle with yourself that you can establish your energy levels, and this is some of the stuff we'll talk about in the workshop, and I'll give some specific things that people can do to help with that. Once you establish that, looking the fungus straight in the eye is not a big deal. Actually, it's not even anything that raises fear in the body because you're above the fear frequency. So it's hard to let yourself come back down into fear because you're resonating in a frequency that it can't even begin to really affect you. But the scriptures, I think it's 2 Corinthians, talk about that light will shine out of the darkness. So we are already in it, like it or not. So the option is to align yourselves and realize that the light is shining out of the darkness. And in that, there are so many resonant, sentient beings and frequencies that are here to constantly aid us. It's like anyone can connect with the Mantis frequency. It's a resonant frequency. It's just, let me explain it like this. Many of us practice the use of crystals. I think that's a very common one in our community. So let's say you use a rose quartz, and you believe that that rose quartz, if you put it on your body in various nodal points, that's going to bring in a frequency that's healing, that's relaxing, that's comforting, right? We believe that. Well, what I'm shown with crystals is that they carry a singular resonant frequency, and they're sentient. So crystals are sentient at a single resonant frequency. So in the case of a rose quartz, it's carrying that single resonant frequency that connects it back to the planet, back to Gaia, back to the planetary logos. And so when we use that resonant frequency, we receive the healing from that particular one. So we have lots of stones around us, right? And we use them various ways. So if you can connect with, that's how you operate with crystals, then that's how everything else is, from plants to herbs to even our extraterrestrial brothers and sisters. They have resonant frequencies. And when you call on that resonant frequency, you will experience it. And based on what it is that frequency does, you'll receive whatever empowerment, healing, a mental, frequency upgrade, consciousness expansion. And so this is specifically how they work. It's really not anything that's above any of us as humans, because our avatars are designed to process and receive these resonant frequencies. That's what we do. And that's what makes us so unique as beings. Which is why we're always trying to be co-opted. And the most recent thing that's going on, protocols, is it's almost, you can think of it the same way that we can think of the evolution of the species that is talked about in Darwinism, right? Going from ape to human. That was a certain type of genetic process that happened, similar to what we're going on now. It's just a little bit more advanced because the technology is a little different. We know it's more of a technology. And the same is true with, similarly, we hear a lot about what happened with the Anunnaki, right? How that species, what they did to sort of separate the DNA and all this sort of stuff. This has been going on because what's happening is a constant shifting humanity into something that the fungus can host entirely. But because we are self-healing, our avatars self-heal at this amazing rate. The genetic memory and code in our avatars, it reverses so quickly that by the time they can try to get enough of us as human species a particular way, we've ascended, we've expanded, we have healed that genetic code, and we become again close to what our original avatar form is. This is why it's not working. So the latest mass protocol, the hope of as I've been shown, the hope that the fungus that is initiating this through many global cooperative beings that are heads of various states, regions, and providences are totally in agreement and totally have, in a lot of ways, the protocol that is being pushed out on humanity right now worked on a smaller level with these beings who agree to it and work as with it. They work in the earth realm as humans, but really aren't. And we've heard a lot of work from David Icke and people like that explain this and do a very good job of explaining it. So since it worked on this sort of micro level, the idea is if we could push it out all in a close time frame and get a large amount of the species to take this protocol, then we can have this massive conversion that wouldn't allow humans to process it out and, let's say, heal the avatars at all these different rates. And where it makes this important, or it really comes together, is the idea that what really heals at this incredible rate is the mass consciousness, because we are, basically it's the work of Jung when he talked about the psyche, the soul. Jung, he illustrated brilliantly in his work, a large part of the psychic exists outside of our avatar. He's proven that there's this area of consciousness that we can connect to that exists outside of us. And the part of our soul, our psyche, comes into this physical being. Well, if you can get everyone's psyche or souls to go into this protocol at the same time, then there isn't the opportunity for us outside, that part of the psyche that exists outside the avatar, to come together and do this mass psychosis healing. Because if you even think back to biblically, what is, we've often all been raised on this, think those things into being as though they were. Our consciousness is what creates the matter. So if you can some kind of way usurp and psyop the consciousness, which is what's really being psyop, by closing down the actual physical avatar, so that we're not communicating as a mass collective consciousness for the positive humanity, they might have had a shot, the fungus, at really taking over a large chunk of the human experience and actually entering it and becoming quasi-human in a real sense. But of course, it's not working, because the big part of it is only 30% of most humans are even susceptible to hypnosis, right? And then you have 10%, it's been documented, that just don't take hypnotic suggestion. And then you have people in between that can go either way.
Right.
So the hope was that you could get like a good 80% of the people bang on with this protocol, and it would have been more of a done deal. So it's over now. It's just not going to be able to happen. And so the good news is that, yes, it has been hijacked. And yes, as a part of the collective psychosis, was psychosis now, because it became that over a period of time, right? Of years and years of this programming of fear and limitation, and that the way you create any type of currency is outside of your body through working and exchanging work for money, which is also another false paradigm that we can talk about at another point. But so because of all of this is broken down, we're now at this place where just hearing this and just allowing yourself to sit back and relax and listen to that inner voice. And if what I'm saying, if you just stop in this moment and just ask yourself deep down, yes or no, the first response that you get is going to be the response from the planetary logos. And that's what you should go with. If you hear a yes, then move with it. If you hear a no, move with that. That's the best way that I can tell that for a person to really try to suss this out on a very personal level, because the only way we will actually walk out and reclaim humanity and actually move from under this domed structure is an individual path. And it's a path back through, and that's what the ascension is. And if I would agree with the term ascension, it would be because we are moving out of this firmament structure that many souls have been trapped in that shouldn't be in here. Now, to the work of Dolores Cannon, and I know you and Julie are really good friends, I've been shown that what Dolores's work showed as the NPCs, these are the beings that were actually, sorry about that, I live near an air base. Those are the beings that actually were trapped underneath this firmament and are a part of the pseudo system of beings that were created by the fungus to originally try to take over. And if you just even think back to the earlier infatoriums, I'll just stick that out there. A lot of the work that's come out of the fairs and stuff where they showed babies in infatoriums, and where do you think all of those babies came from? That's a whole nother story, but it connects back to the fungus and an earlier time where they had tried to do the same thing a couple hundred years ago. And it just didn't work out. So it's definitely a message of hope, everyone.
It's a message of hope. It's a message of resilience. It's obviously a message of courage.
Yes.
Here's the question I have. There's no way I could if I even try to regurgitate what she just said. I can maybe distill it, but I don't think it's even necessary. You were very clear and very articulate. As I'm listening to you, Robyn, talk about this process, the attempts that have happened previously, and where we are right now in this trajectory, and I'm looking at nearly 8 billion people, a percentage of which are taking or are preparing to take a conscious and proactive step in doing exactly what you just described. There will
Mhm.
clearly and unequivocally be a bunch of others that will do nothing, that will continue to remain oblivious. Bless their hearts. That's fine. But the question is, we've talked about the 144,000, right?
Yes,
Will
yes.
that symbolic number, let's call it, help with those who know nothing of what we're talking about and would know nothing, consciously, of course, to do anything? In other words, what will
Yeah.
happen to the individuals who are outside of this framework and just for whatever reason have not developed their own psyche to the point of having this epiphany?
So definitely, if we go back to the idea of the um, the electromagnetic beings exist in a neutral field. So when you move yourself back into this space of, and we accomplish it with doing things like meditation, that brings you into the zero field, because that electromagnetic field is that place of the zero field. It's the zero field that allows you to move in and out of portals, which is why so many of our, space brothers and sisters moving out of portals easily, because they've balanced this field that they can go in and out. It's like you're not creating a shock or resistance to move in and out of the electric grids because you're neutralized, right? If we just try to go in and out of a grid, we probably fry ourselves to death if you weren't sure you're neutralized, because you're either negative or positive. The same thing that happens if you put your car battery in on wrong. What's going to happen? You'll fry your system. If you if you connect the negative to the positive and the opposite way around, when it's not supposed to be that way, it fries your system.
Mhm.
So the thing is to move into the space of being a more electromagnetic balanced being. If you think about the sine wave, the sine wave goes like this. If you have two sine waves coming together, they normally move together as a negative and a positive, right? And that's what creates circles. Sine waves are different shapes as well, but let's just say the circular one, which is, it actually is a symbol of the rate of motion. It's not so much time as a lot of times people think of, but it's a rate of motion. So if you're at a neutral place, it means you have very little motion. You have very small sine waves. They're just very small. So that's what happens in meditation. That's what happens in these places where we just sort of bring our bodies down, when we go into alpha state, which is a great state to go into the lucid field. We're just relaxing, which is why that's what televisions do. So televisions put you in this alpha state, and then it programs you, which is why I've always said it's telling a lie visually. They tell you just what the thing is, so you're in an alpha when you look at TV, and then anything that's coming out of that can program you. So we can also program ourselves by going into nature, sitting under a tree, meditating. That's why all these things the mystics talked about actually fundamentally serve a technological purpose within our avatar. So when we do that, so there may be beings out there, that are more at electromagnetic base, or they may be at a magnetic or electric. So let's say it's a negative and positive pole. Doesn't mean you're negative or positive in terms of your consciousness. It just means that you may be resonating a little bit more too high or too low on one of those frequencies. And so what you want to do is balance and constantly bring yourself to the middle. So it really doesn't matter whether or not if it's a negative or a positive or electro or a magnetic frequency that you're resonating. If you just focus on things that bring you to the middle, that way you're balancing that frequency, and that frequency will allow you to be right, and you'll move along as a part of the collective consciousness that Jung talked about, because consciousness is what? It's frequency, right? When we're meditating, we're going into the field of consciousness. So because we're elevating, expanding as cosmic into the field of cosmic consciousness, it would make sense that we would do the things that would connect our electric frequency, our electromagnetic frequency, to the higher field. And that's why things like meditation work so supremely. I feel that, you know, a lot of people talk about diet or things like that. Yeah. I mean, you know, what I think is more important is to eat whatever way your body is telling you to eat, number one.
Mm-hmm. I tend
And
to
if you're
agree.
in meditation and if you're doing these things, your body will tell you what it needs. But right now, we're also in stressful times. And if you eat a food that's a comfort food for you, regardless on whether or not it's on somebody's ideal list of food, it doesn't matter, because if you can eat foods that may not be on the ideal list, whoever that somebody is, and you're calm, you're relaxed, because it's keeping you in a good centered place, right? Or you could try to eat this other diet over there that is on somebody's ideal list, and you're stressed out all over the place. You're because it doesn't resonate with you. I forgot to eat that today. Oh my goodness. Now that's creating the stress that nobody needs right now. So I say, as opposed to worrying about changing habits, that's not the point. The point is to work on consciousness. If you work on making sure that your consciousness is at that 0 point, that you're existing in this electromagnetic field, you'll know it, because things are just not going to bother you. You're just going to begin to see the world more clearly. That is where I would put my focus over all this. A lot of this other stuff is distraction.
Right.
And it's distraction by purpose.
I think you're spot on. I know that this may be controversial to some, but I tend to resonate with what you're saying. You
And
know,
this is coming
what
from a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian all my life. I
there
came
you
in
have it.
here just not liking the way meat smelled and the way
Because
milk
you didn't
smelled.
like it, not because it
But
was on somebody's list. Once
right, it
again.
was just, that's my, and I wanted to say that I'm that. And this is a person who's been a lifelong vegetarian saying that I don't see problem with a lot of other people's diets. If it's meat, if it's whatever you're doing, if right now that's not a negative or a positive, because when you exist in a space of neutrality, you really begin to see there's no negative and
Right.
positives.
Well, I want to piggyback on that point you talk about with neutrality and equilibrium. That's the word that comes to mind. I mean, with
Yes.
the way we're made up, from the hemispheres of our brain to the our dominant writing hand versus the other, I have always felt this necessity to bring the consciousness of ourselves into balance in order to reap the benefits of both. Otherwise, we wouldn't have both.
Mhm.
This has hallmarks of alchemy, and I know you know a little bit about that too. Let's get
Absolutely.
into that a little bit. Where does
Definitely.
the alchemical, on both sides, frankly, the alchemical as it relates to the fungus, the
Hmm.
alchem the alchemy of what's going on in terms of what it may be trying to accomplish and how they're using alchemy to do that, but also alchemy that is part of who we are. I say we're
Hmm.
alchemists at our core. We have the ability to turn scrap metal into gold. We have the ability to take the extreme left and right, bring it together and create what? A third reality.
Hmm.
This is that neutrality. Speak
Hmm.
to that if you would, Robin, a bit.
You're
Alchemy.
right on with that, because that's one of the things that the Mantis has brought up last night. That's very interesting, because they wanted to talk about alchemy, and so they entered the conversation from the standpoint of emotions, and how oftentimes they've been referred to as neutral beings, and that's true. But a lot of times people have elaborated it into the emotions that they don't have emotions. Well, they in fact do have emotions, but there is emotions that exist in the zero field. So, by example, a lot of times, this has been my personal experience too, as I have a German Shepherd puppy, she's just a year old, who's taught me this, the idea of when you to speak without emotion, right? So to ask for things and expect things without the associated emotion. So when I give her a command, if I talk to her just like I'm talking right now, she could be bouncing off the walls. But if I talk to her like I'm talking to you right now, she'll sit down and listen to me. But if I match the emotion, like, what are you doing that? Get down, stop that. Oh my goodness, she's just bouncing even more. So that's me speaking with emotion, right? And so But I could also speak with neutrality, with the absence of being concerned with whether or not she breaks something or whatever happens, but just but getting my resonance out so that she hears me and that she will address my command. This is the type of neutrality that beings like the Mantis have. It's not that they don't have empathy. It's just that they're not overloaded with empathy. Like I know I am. I have too much empathy. And my thing is I'm trying to work back to that central point where I have enough to be effective, but not too much to be overly emotional. And then you have beings that are on the other end of it that are just no empathy, complete apathy. And they may be concerned about moving themselves to the middle. So with that example of how we can be neutral, we can exist in the field of neutrality and have empathy, that we can manage it so that we're not over emoting all over the place and thinking that that type of empathy is a good thing. Well, it's really kind of working against us because it's pulling us into one of the either the field of electricity or one of magnetism. And we don't want that. We want to stay here. So the point of alchemy exists in that neutral zone, right? It exists in the zone of the zero field. And so we are by nature alchemists, but in order to, and our bodies naturally perform alchemy. Alchemy is not something that exists outside of us. It actually exists more harmoniously inside of our avatars, and we use it to generate. So to my point, to the point of this, we generate resonant tones, right? So we can generate sounds. We generate pictures, images. And we also are able to take our physiology through the crystalline or the silicon aspect of our bodies, and we manifest. So we are a manifesting machine. So using sound, so we'll use the common one of Om. You know, everybody knows Om. So if you use the common sound of Om, and you have the picture of the symbol, you can hold it in your mind, or you can look at it, you can meditate on it, however you want to see that. And then you also are generating the sound and the tone back into the physical body. So when you're meditating, you're not necessarily trying to push it out, you're trying to push it in. And when we push it in and we bring it down into our root chakra, which is the cinnabar field, we can talk about cinnabar at another time, is a very amazing element that is fundamental to alchemy. When we push it back, and it's interesting that the Taoists call the lower Dantian or the root chakra the cinnabar field. That's also our reproduction. It's also connected to the cosmic womb. So when we push it back in there, we create. So literally we can manifest through the alchemical processes. When you look at a lot of the very old alchemy, the documents on alchemy, there's always a picture and there's always a musical staff or sound or creation that goes along with the formula. So if you have the formula, but you don't have the picture or the music, or those are missing, you don't have the Trinity. You don't have the Trinity, the three that are needed to make this thing perform. So if you think about in terms of the body, are the three Dantians that the Taoists talk about in Tai Chi. So the lower Dantian, the cinnabar field, that's where you're going to create. That's the cauldron. That's the pot. The womb is the cauldron, the pot. The heart area is connected to the thymus. This is the voice, because it's the thymus that communicates between the heart and the pineal gland, the third eye. So that's the voice. That's where the sound comes from. And the pineal gland is the picture. That's the picture. Here again, we have the three Dantians. We have we have the Trinity. We have the Holy Trinity even, which is why so many of the alchemical symbols, so many of the base symbols are triangles. Here again, we have the three. So alchemy is a natural state for us as beings to understand and participate in, which is why it's been one of the sort of the secret sciences that you notice is just not talked about. And when this realm was reset or usurped or hijacked, like I like your word hijacked, it was reset into the periodic table. So the alchemical table morphed into the periodic table. And so that's a misteaching. And it can cause you to, I mean, it's causing us to sort of stay where we are. If we really transferred back into the alchemical table and used alchemy as this idea of Trinity, and that's what we're moving back to. That's a part of the expansion as well.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, you're putting in so many elements from the historical to the chemical, to so many things. We're talking about history, and we're talking about how we apply all of this to the present day at this pivotal point that we are in, this precipice that we're clearly on. And we don't necessarily need to consciously know that. I have a feeling that we have that embedded within
Yeah.
the Akashic field within, is what I like to call it. And perhaps there will be, in speaking to those individuals that may not be consciously aware of what we're talking about, but if it's in there, will that be triggered? I wonder if there will be some event, let's just say, that might trigger this knowing, this remembrance, that will put us on our path, put us back into a state of equilibrium, bring back that alchemical aspect to ourselves, so that we can go into this expansion period as a collective versus a one-off.
Yeah, I believe that there is an event on the horizon. Here again, it's another one of the events, the fungus. They're throwing out events left and right. Let me just one that I would bring to the attention of our audience that's current, that just happened. Just go inside and meditate on, or like go into the zero field we're talking about, and listen to possibilities of what just happened with the tornado that just went through 5 states, that stayed on the ground for 600 miles or something like that.
30 tornadoes.
We have to ask ourselves, was that a natural phenomena, or is that an event that is being put out there by what I've already described as the fungus, to sort of kind of create a certain fear, death, like you have these very low frequencies. And it's just constantly polarizing us as beings. It's this constant polarizing. It's like this beating away, to kind of cause us to conform. So I throw that out as something just to go, you know what I mean? Because I definitely look at it probably differently than maybe others may. So that's an example, but it's not really working because it didn't really have the effect, I think, that it was designed to, because people are worn out. As much as you want to like really respond, you're like, oh my God,
people are numb, no question about it. And
right.
By the
so
way,
there's going to be something that's going to go to another level, I believe, that's going to be, and I know there's others out there like myself who believe this. We were talking about a little bit about that before we started the show. And it's going to be something that's really going to try to shock humanity into the pathway that the fungus has been laying out with all the protocols and stuff. And what I could just simply say to anyone, when this does happen, in that instant, when you recognize, wow, this has got to be something major, stop, try to settle yourself. And if you don't do anything else, but just go inside and ask the question, is this of the light
or no?
Yes or no. Right. Yes or no. And whatever you get, generally the planetary logos, Gaia is so easily accessible because we walk on her, and we're made of her. So it's very easy to hear her voice. You may not hear all the complexities, but that yes or no will come powerfully.
Well, I think that's where I think, Robyn, that's where synchronicity comes in. We have to understand that the language of the universe is often through symbols, and she uses a myriad of methods to bring that through, whether it's a message on television, a conversation. I can't tell you how many of the journeyers have said, oh, I was thinking about thus and so, and lo and behold, I turned on your show, Alexis, and here you are talking about it. So it's brilliant in that it knows exactly what to use, when and where to get your attention. So that's that. We're going to be winding down soon, but I want to bring up one more thing.
So just one point real quick, if I can. To that point, when this event, that the possible event that could occur, that many of us are speculating will. The one reason why Gaia really enforces to practice the internal thing, and I 100% agree with you in synchronicity and how we like a show like yours could, after a person hears a yes or a no, a show like yours could pop up and it'll reinforce it. Like they'll understand, oh, that's why I got it. But when this happens, we may be out of communication with one another. And so to begin to practice now, this idea of hearing internally is so important because it'll settle you. If you practice it now and then you pop onto shows and other synchronicities pop up, you'll learn to trust that, so that when you can't get the outside stimuli, you'll know, nope, I'm hearing from Gaia. And to your point, this will happen. Whatever happens is only going to be for a short period of time. So let's say it's the worst thing somebody could think about. Maybe you can't talk to anybody, the internet's down, all that kind of stuff. Trust that it's not going to be a very long period of time. It could be a couple of weeks. It's not going to be like a forever thing. And I've definitely been shown
agree with you.
Not forever.
I do. Yeah.
So I want to put that out there as a part of the hope. Like, don't sweat it. Just have some food and some water and hang inside.
Right. No, I'm glad you brought that up. Thanks for that. And I do think it's important. Again, we have become so reliant on the external stimuli to give us our truth in whatever form we take it, including synchronicity coming vis-a-vis these technologies. One of the things is, very briefly, what I will do in practicing looking at other methods by which synchronicity or messages can come through is I have a tree in the backyard that I call Yin. She's a very wise pine tree. It is a she, I'm sure. And when I'm asking a question or just really wanting to know whether she's hearing me, I'll ask her to shake her leaves, move and bend your branches.
That's a good one.
I think you know the answer to many of the times I've done that. The answer is yes, she would move. Listen, I want to bring this up before we close down. And yes, folks, you know where we're going after this. We're going to the Patreon after show to take this a little bit deeper. But I want to bring up something having to do with this. We've talked about what you have dubbed the fungus. I think at this point, within context, you all know what we're speaking of. You're probably familiar with something called the Nag Hammadi, the Gnostic scriptures, the Nag Hammadi scriptures, which I find fascinating. I have owned this text for a long time. It's a international version that was edited by a man named Marvin Meyer, I believe his last name was, did a brilliant job of transcribing and thus editing. But he speaks of, not he, but the scriptures themselves, not unlike other, well, this is considered, Gnostics are considered early Christianity, but not unlike other more recent books, religious texts, talking about this influence, let's just say, that is considered to be malevolent and having a desire to take over humanity, etc. But there's a chapter in the Nag Hammadi scriptures that is called, and I'm trying to think if I can think of it, I don't have it written down here, but it deals with this archon influence, that's what they call it, as well as the demiurge. And Meyer, I hope I'm getting this name right, Marvin, who did the editing of the scriptures, points to what is inferred in the text. I'll read it. He says this in the introduction of this chapter. To be sure, a major point of the Nag Hammadi text is that the malevolent demiurge and archons are real and do exist. And here's the key. But when they are opposed vigorously by the children of the light, they will be defeated.
Yes.
I was so touched when I read that. We've seen hallmarks of this before as well. We've seen representations or interpretations of this sort of thing before. But the fact that, and forgive me, guys, maybe I can put something up on the screen in post that shows the, I'm actually going to show an image of the book, but also the chapter in which the texts go into explicit detail about this fungus, this archon influence, and what they also refer to as a demiurge. But this is powerful. When vigorously opposed by the children of the light, meaning there will be a revelation of what has been going on. And as such, there will be a retaliation, if you will, by the light to expose this and thus annihilate it. That's my sort of distillation. So I just wanted to bring that up. I think that is super, super powerful.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
And that's where we
by the
are right
way,
now. We are in the period that he's talking about. We are in that. We're like smack dab in the middle of this happening
absolutely.
right now. Like
Right.
any second now, this, because the children of light are already opposing. So many people have opposed it, or else it would have been a done deal by now with protocols. So we
Right.
can see there's huge opposition. And when this next event, whatever it is, begins to roll out, that's when he's talking about will really rise up against the demiurge.
Absolutely, absolutely. By the way, I just wanted to bring up where I quoted Rob, and I just did a fairly detailed post over on higherjourneys.com dealing with this possibility of the ascension being hijacked, the who, what, and why of the control agenda. Go over and check that out. I'll have a link below, but over on higherjourneys.com where Robin weighs in, as well as several other consciousness warriors, I call them, on the state of affairs and where we are and where we're going, which is, as you say, Robin, at the end of the day, a message of hope, of
Yeah,
faith,
definitely.
of trust, and
Mhm.
of love, really.
And I can say just very quickly that Gaia, when she came to me and showed me what was happening, what was going to happen the past 2 years, she showed me this in August of 2019 and began to warn that this was happening. And to the date that all this stuff was happening, you know this, I've told you before, things began to roll out to the date that she was giving me months ahead. But what she did show me is that we are coming out on the other side, and humanity will come back into a place of paradisical peace. We will. So it could be another couple of years. It could, we'll know at a point that we've won. And now it's like the reclamation process. We got to kind of begin to reclaim things and clean things up and whatever, but we'll know that we've won. So I've definitely been shown the other side of this, that this is not something that's just a hopeless. It's going to
It's
be
not
like
a
this.
done deal. No, the chapter has not been fully written, as I say.
Right.
And I think there are
Right.
quite a few of us that know that. It is, all the cliches apply. The darkness is indeed before the dawn. The magic does exist, live within the madness, as mad as this world is today. I want to remind everyone about Robin's upcoming workshop this Saturday. If you're watching this when it airs, if you happen to be watching it, a year down the road, once we're past all of this, you can still go back and get a recording of the workshop, How to Stop the Ascension Hijack and Stay on the High Frequency Path. This isn't just about preaching what she feels is going on. She'll be preaching too, but there are some really, really critical action steps, Robin, that you want our participants to take, having to
Right.
do with things like rewiring your brain, getting a little bit deeper into the alchemical aspects that we talked about today. So I would definitely urge you to sign up for
And the
Robin's
Mantis have shown me
workshop.
some technology that I'll share in our workshop,
That's
um,
great.
that will help push it out. So yeah,
That's fantastic.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
exciting, guys. Exciting. Hey, come on over and join us next door. Doors opening now over on Patreon, where we're going to go a little bit deeper and join us, would you? We need you over on Patreon. You know the deal. I'm not gonna start preaching, but we do need your support. If you want to see Higher Journeys continue, I'm not begging. I'm just letting you know how this is working. And you get a bunch of good stuff too, like these great conversations we're having with Robyn McClendon. So consider joining us over on Patreon. Link, of course, is below. Robin, thank you so much as always, my dear. And I'm so looking forward to working with you once again for the workshop. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you for having me, and I am as well.
I
Appreciate it.
love you. You know I
Love
love you, right? I'm putting it out there on the record. I love you.
I love you too. You know that dearly.
And you know I love you too, journeyers. So until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching Higher Journeys.